Hi everyone, I hope you're all well and welcome to another Equal Group webinar. My name is Zakiya Ilyas and I am the digital content creator here at the Equal Group, and I'm going to be the host for today's webinar. So today's webinar is all about parental equality and the role that employers play in creating inclusive parental leave policies in the workplace. And I am very aware that, this topic is such a huge one and that it will be very difficult to kind of touch on all the different areas in the space of this 1 hour. But what I am hoping for is that today's webinar will act as a, starting point that will just encourage different people to have open conversations with their friends, their families, partners, and employers around parental and gender equality. So today I am going to be joined by a very exciting panel of guests. You'll be hearing from Lizzie Martin, who is an executive coach and founder of Work Life Mother, Nina Karegar, who is a digital strategist and who was raised and is currently living in Sweden, but previously lived in the UK for several years. And finally, Michael Johnson-Ellis, who is the co-founder of TwoDads.U.K, the Model Family Show 2021, and My Surrogacy Journey. So I'm going to pass on over to our guests so that they can give themselves a brief introduction. So Lizzie, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to be here, and thank you very much for the invite to be part of the panel today. So my name's Lizzie, and I'm an executive career and leadership coach, and I founded my coaching business, Work Life Mother, about 4 years ago when I was on my first maternity leave, which probably sounds like a little bit of a cliche. But my focus is all about how we can, as organisations, best support talent to return back to work at the end of a period of leave, such as maternity leave, or shared parental leave, adoption or surrogacy. My work is a combination of one-to-one coaching with the returner, but also consulting and supporting organisations with their people culture and what the experience looks like. So very much around how are the line managers upskilled to be able to provide a brilliant experience for their returners, so that we can boost not only their progression, their career progression, but also reduce retention issues. So looking at attrition and turnover.
Well, thank you for the invite to be on the panel. So I'm Michael Johnson-Ellis. I'm a gay dad. And before having my children, I was a director of business development for a city recruitment firm. And like most people, having children was one of the biggest changes in my career. And that led me to not only blog about my experiences of being a gay dad and how we had to fit into a very heteronormative pathway in many ways, but we wanted to raise awareness about same-sex parenting as well as UK surrogacy. So we formed TwoDads.U.K, which went on to support over 320 men become fathers through surrogacy. We campaigned for the law reform at the House of Parliament and for the all-party parliamentary group, and we have successfully challenged and changed policy in 132 NHS trusts to develop new policy that includes surrogacy and LGBTQ people within maternity services. And because I've not got enough to do, as well as keeping my two kids on this planet, I'm also founder of the Modern Family Show, which is the only LGBTQ family building event which is taking place, which took place in September every year. And we've also got our own surrogacy non-profit organisation, My Surrogacy Journey.
Thanks for that introduction, Michael. Clearly you've got a lot going on, and so thank you for taking the time out to be part of this webinar. And then finally, Nina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Really nice to be on this panel. Thank you. So my name is Nina Karegar, and I work for Investors Digital. We're a digital communication agency, or we don't call ourselves an agency company. And in the company, we primarily work with developing enterprise web solutions. And I work there as a strategist. It's actually, this topic is of great interest to me. I also have children. I've got two. and a recent mother for the second, who's now 5 months old. And I've been living in the UK for several years, and for the last year or so, I've moved back to Sweden, and I'm currently gone back to work. So I'm also working half time whilst I'm also being a mother as well and raising a child. So it'd be interesting to speak about how Sweden and the Nordic countries like approaching things to parental leaves and the impact that has on children. I'm specifically interested in the topic of around getting women more into leadership, and so I'll be maybe having a little bit of opinions around that I'd be great to like share and see the comparisons of how Sweden works versus the UK.
Brilliant. So thank you all for those introductions, and it's great to hear, that we have a variety of knowledge and, lived experiences on our panel today. So I'm sure audiences are looking forward to what you all have to say, and it will be a very insightful session. So for all of you who are watching, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please do post them in the Zoom chat, and then we'll have time towards the end of the session to answer these. I would also love this to be a really interactive session in general. So we encourage you to share any pictures that you have and any thoughts that you have on social media using the hashtag TEG webinar. And don't forget to tag us at the Equal Group on Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn too. I also think it's worth mentioning here that next Wednesday, so on the 24th, we will be hosting a post-webinar discussion from 11 to 12 again. And this is basically a space to keep the conversation going and allow for key decision makers to share their best practices around specific EDI concerns. So if you are interested in taking part in that, please fill out the expression of interest form that I'm going to be posting in the chat, and then we'll get into contact with you. So I think I've spoken enough now, and I guess we can move on to our first point of discussion. So this is for Lizzie. This discussion that we're having right now is a very timely one, and with the current news and the impact of the pandemic has had on gender equality, we're seeing that encouraging flexible working options are one way to tackle the gender pay gap, but also equalising parental leave policies is just as important too. So my question for Lizzie is, what is the importance of shared parental leave and what can be achieved by it culturally?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Zach. And I think it's probably important to first of all look at the percentage of shared parental leave uptake in the UK at the moment, which is around about 2% at the moment. So it's a really low percentage uptake. And what we've actually seen happen in recent years is that the uptake of shared parental leave has gone down, whereas the uptake of maternity leave and enhanced maternity leave has gone up. So we're seeing a bit of a gap there. And what's really important about shared parental leave is that it challenges the gender stereotypes and the narrative that we have at home and in the workplace, that caring for the young is something that sits with a certain gender, that it sits in the lap of the mother, and it's not something that is shared with men and women equally. So it's really important that we have a robust system in place that encourages men to be able to take time, more than 2 weeks, with their children, particularly in those early years, but it also sets the tone for how they are then present and how they see their role at home for years to come. And we know that men want to spend more time with their children. We know that men, working fathers, particularly millennial fathers, when you think about the modern father, they want to be playing an active role. They don't want to be living an imbalance of work and life. So we know that it feeds that need that men have got. We know that it improves some of the gender sort of stereotypes and narratives that we have. But it also has a massive knock-on impact on many other stakeholders. So when we have a look at the benefits for women, when men are able to take longer on shared parental leave, we see reduces mental health issues and stress in women. So we see a reduction in the pressure that it puts on our healthcare system as well. So if men are more present and they're taking on more caring responsibilities, we do see sickness and anxiety go down for women. So a really positive impact on women's health and well-being, but also on their career progression. And I know that Nina's probably going to have loads of stats up her sleeve, how the Nordic countries do brilliantly with this, because there is a correlation between the amount of time a father takes in caring for young children and female career progression, specifically around their income levels. So we know that there's a positive knock-on effect of men taking shared parental leave and how that facilitates women back into the workplace. And we want to be supporting that. We want to be supporting female workforce participation. So benefits for men, benefits for the mothers. It gives men confidence and it helps them to develop the skills of being with their children. But it then also has a knock-on impact on children's development. So there's various different studies that look at the benefits of a father being present with their children, and we know that that can then improve their social mobility and their IQ in the longer term. So a triple whammy, really: benefits for fathers, benefits for mothers, benefits the children, and also benefits workforce participation.
Brilliant. You've made a number of amazing points there. And just to kind of elaborate on what you said about, shared parental leave is, percentages going down, just to share with the audiences, research that was conducted last year by a law firm found that only 2% of eligible couples were actually utilising shared parental leave. And that's despite the scheme actually being introduced 6 years ago. So, that figure is exceptionally low. And as, following on from that, then, Lizzie, what are your thoughts on why there is such a low uptake, and what can be done in the UK to change that?
The percentage is low because of a number of reasons. I think, first of all, not enough awareness exists around it. So I think a lot of individuals and employers and line managers aren't equipped with the knowledge to understand what is available with shared parental leave. So going beyond paternity leave and looking at the shared parental leave policies. A lot of men aren't eligible for shared parental leave. So if you haven't, there's quite a lot of, it's quite complicated actually. If anyone's gone through the process of shared parental leave, it's a really complicated process and it's quite difficult to understand how it works. But there's a lot of men that won't qualify for it. So if you're work freelance, or if you haven't been with your employer for long enough, you might also not meet the threshold to qualify for shared parental leave. Financially, it also doesn't make a lot of sense for many families, couples, because shared parental leave is less likely to be topped up than maternity leave. So it's more likely that a woman is going to have access to enhanced maternity pay than enhanced shared parental leave pay. So if you're looking at it from a financial decision-making perspective, it often financially doesn't make sense for the man to take the leave, or for the higher earner to take the leave. And I think the other thing is that shared parental leave doesn't sit independently to maternity leave. So it takes time from the mother's maternity leave. So and again, this is the complication. And I think when you've got one organisation speaking to another organisation and trying to make this sharing of leave work, I think it can make it quite challenging. But the shared parental leave takes the time out of the mother's leave. And I think two things are happening there. One, you've got mothers that are unwilling to give that portion of their leave away. So they don't want to give it up. And you've got men saying, well, actually, it's easier for me to stay at work because I'm the higher earner. And actually, workplace attitudes and cultures can sometimes facilitate the female being absent, but make it harder for the man to take the time. Men working flexibly, men leaving on time, men taking extended leave can be more challenging for them as a gender than it is for mothers. So if we could have a system where the man's shared parental leave is enhanced and it sits independently to maternity leave, then it's more likely that we're going to see that percentage increase from 2%. And it means that you don't have to have one organisation going through this complicated system, speaking to another organisation and trying to work out the complicated setup of it all. So making it easier to understand, making it easier to implement, having SPL sitting separately to enhance maternity, it means that it's non-transferable and they're more likely to take it. So I know that is something that happens in other countries as well. So it'll be interesting to see what the experience is like of that. And if it's topped up and it's that amount of money is enhanced, so you've got enhanced shared parental leave, then it's also going to reduce the financial burden that it has on households when they want to have two parents present for their young child.
Exactly. I think, you really highlighted the fact that, despite it being called shared parental leave in the UK, it is more of a transfer. So, that change does need to take place. And I'm just wondering, Michael and Nina, do you have any thoughts on this question, this topic that you'd like to share?
Well, firstly, I'm totally fascinated by everything that Liz has just said, and so much really resonates with the situation that we were in. My daughter Tallulah was born in 2016, so shared parental leave was still fairly new, and the chaos that it caused my previous employer was just super distracting for everybody, and almost there was that element of resentment from the get-go with me wanting to take leave because we're two men and my company had never experienced this before, and it was a really challenging point for not only for the HR function, but for everyone within our organization and our board, because it was suddenly a topic that was brought forward and I think for the first time I really experienced what women have been going through for decades, and that scrutiny of me wanting to spend time raising my children. So I'm totally bought in and in awe of some of the stuff I'm hearing already. There's so much to talk about, and I'm really curious to see how it's done in the Nordics, because I'm sure it's night and day, certainly with the take up of shared parental leave. My husband was a freelancer, so we couldn't share that benefit, so that made it even more challenging, and the income drop was severe. But we'll come on to that in a bit.
Perfect. And I think that links brilliantly to the next question, which I was actually going to ask Nina. She has experience of parental leave in the UK and in Sweden. So, what are the key differences in the systems?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've interpreted is like the main issue with that you can see the difference in how you're being treated in the workplace and so on, is that in Sweden you're paid parental leave by the government. So if you are expecting a child, or if a father wants to take 1 year off to be with the child, it's not looked down at. They're not frowning at it. They're saluting it and congratulating you. But I think also it could be that the company itself is not paying for it, so it doesn't go from their pocket. Whereas in the UK, companies are paying for, whether it's like 4 months that they pay full paid, and then it goes into some of the government support. And that impacts organizations. So already, when this pandemic started, I was in this flexible working group on Facebook, and there was quite a lot of mothers who was being kicked out from work, and especially if they were pregnant. This is in the UK. So there were a lot of women who were being treated badly and not knowing how to approach things. But it comes down to as well that the fundamental difference is that here in Sweden, the system is set up so that the government is substituting that parents can take the time off for the children. And even if your child is sick, we have something where the company is not paying for it. The government is paying so that you can stay home and take care of your sick child. So that's the main difference that I'm aware of. And then we also have in the UK, and I mean, Sweden is pretty good. We, like, Norway's, I think, leading in this space, but we also have that if you do share the parental leave, so if both the dad takes their days as well, they get an incentive from the government. So they're really encouraged to take the time off. Whereas I don't know if we have a system like that in the UK. So to encourage making sure that not just the mothers are taking the time off, they're even giving them a sort of like an extra incentive. And I know that's helped as well. But most parents here, like fathers, do want to take the time off, and they do understand the importance of that. And organizations are supporting them in that decision, which is great.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. I remember when we were speaking, previously in a conversation, Nina, you were saying to me that, even if you go to the park in Sweden, you'll see like loads of fathers lined up with their little kids, and it's crazy the difference here. You rarely see that at all. So definitely it is an institutional problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons, I mean, so here in Sweden, you see a lot of women who are like the breadwinners, or who are more paid than men as well. So, and I think it stems back to, like, you have more women in leadership as well, but I think it stems back to how the whole system is set up. So it encourages women to go back to work, so they don't take like this long gap to raise the child. But there's another issue on top for that, which is that in Sweden you don't pay for childcare. Like, so when the child is 1 year old, you do pay, but it's like £100 a month, whereas in the UK it's a huge cost. So you tend to see that whoever is earning less money takes a longer gap to raise the child. And in the Norwegian countries, when the child is 1 year old, you can put them in a nursery, and it's substituted by the government, and that encourages, again, maybe for the dad to take 6 months off once the mother's stopped breastfeeding, and then within a year and a half, when the child is a year and a half, they're both back into work. So it helps women as well, accelerating into the leadership career as well. Sorry, I don't know if I've kind of tangent off.
No, brilliant. No, that is very true, because that is a huge fear that women have here, like in the UK, and I'm sure other countries too, that if they're thinking about having a child, then that's it, their career is going to be at a standstill from that moment. And definitely, I agree with Kate in the chat. I think we all want to move to Sweden now.
Just going to add in there, I think it's maybe difficult to change all the policies, like, although it would be wishful, but then we're talking about like how taxes are distributed, etc. But I think one thing that organizations can do is that really try to continue encouraging parents or to have that flexible working arrangement, so that if they can work from home and be able to balance both childcare and work. And I mean, I don't know, the setup I have, I don't know if I would have had it if I would be working for a UK organization, but I'm working 50% now, whilst also taking care of a newborn, like, or it's 5 months old, which is quite a juggle. but I have that set up because the company culture, they're encouraging it, and they allow you to have that flexibility. And so I guess one of the things I would just say is that maybe, you know, with this conversation, we can't change all the policies to be like this, the Swedish system, but at least companies can, first and foremost, trying to encourage like the flexible working arrangement and having understanding of the pressure that parents go through.
Exactly. And you actually, you know, answered the next question, which I was going to ask you, which was, you know, what policies and specific programs can organizations put in place to kind of support their parenting staff? So, you know, that's one thing. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just if your job allows you to work from home, that's great. But and I think you need to not just like just staying at home, but it needs to be like, okay, you might be working, like let's say you're working like Mondays and Tuesdays, but the manager also have to understand that, you know, you might spread the workload during the whole week. You might even be working some late nights, and not just allowing that person to have that without being too controlling or being it's an easy thing to say, but I think that creates a happier like parents, like, and they're able to provide a better work as well. But you do need to have that trust level and having that good relationship. But I think from organizations' perspective, definitely just encouraging parents to, okay, let's support you in making this flexible arrangement.
Brilliant. That's definitely true, especially in terms of like the misconceptions around flexible working and then also part-time working. I think that, you know, with part-time, there's a tendency to, even when you're not supposed to be working, it's always on your mind, like I have to check this, I have to do this, etc. It's flexible, as you said, it's for you and it works around your schedule. So thank you for all those brilliant points, Nina. And now I want to move on to some questions for Michael. So you did mention earlier some of, you know, the difficulties that you faced, and in general, the kind of lengths that the LGBTQ plus community have to go to for parenthood. So if you're happy to, are you able to elaborate on some of the challenges that the LGBTQ plus communities face when it comes to paid parental leave policies?
Yeah, sure. And I think this also goes beyond that and also impacts those people that are also going through fertility treatment, because the leave required on the run up to having fertility treatment is also that there's a real issue and a gap there too, which I know a number of organizations are also championing. But for us, because of my relationship, it was quite clear, and I needed to almost expose myself when we were starting our journey. You know, having children through surrogacy isn't a quick process, and there was years of research, and we decided to have our children in the UK with the help of an egg donor and a gestational surrogate. But when we embarked on that, number one, we were excited, so we were quite public with talking about our family building. It's what we wanted to do, so we were clearly sharing that. But I noticed, and other people from our community also say the same, once that disclosure is out there, there was definitely a change in the mood and the way that I was perceived in the workplace. And especially being a man, and I hate to say it, but I worked in quite a sort of toxic masculine sort of environment where firstly, people even questioned why I wanted to be a parent and how that my life was going to be different and, you know, less fun. So there was just that pressure from the get-go. And I noticed that when we were having time off for fertility appointments and for tests, that was all taken. I booked leave for all of that because I was so aware that I was already being closely observed and my commitment was already in question. And I'd been in a board level role, so I'd always worked super hard. But the moment that was put out there, there was a real shift in the mood and how I was viewed. And And that, when I came then to start talking about, as often people then have to start preparing for our leave, is how does the business even tackle that and prepare themselves for that? And our HR department spent hours talking to ACAS and constantly getting wording wrong and putting me on adoption leave when I was having a child through surrogacy. And I know there are some similarities, but the terminology was always wrong. And the assumption that the child wouldn't be mine was frequently made because of the way the child was being born. And it was, there's a massive lack of education into, I think, fertility treatment and family building generally. Policy, what I've always seen, is always very sort of gender bias and not necessarily gender neutral, which I think is something that is really important, particularly when you look at some of the stats coming out from the Family Equality Council, when you're looking at millennials turning to reproductive medicine, where previously it was adoption. There's a real increase in the numbers that we're seeing of people from our community having fertility treatments, and therefore less time out of the workplace. And I guess that's why we're also seeing this new trend of fertility benefits in the workplace coming through, because stats show that people are far more productive when they're supported better, and I think Nina's already touched on that. Yeah. But it was really challenging. And I absolutely, without doubt, know that once our daughter arrived, I was viewed and treated completely differently. And the pressures put on me to work increased hours were almost done as a test to see how committed I was. And we'll go on to talk about some of the things that were shared and said to me. But it was definitely an eye-opening experience being, in that category of, white privileged male. I absolutely saw what everyone else has been experiencing, and it was shocking. And unfortunately, this continues to be the norm in the majority of workplaces when it comes to men having babies, or same-sex female couples wanting to do shared motherhood, or trans people preserving their fertility. This isn't going away. It's becoming more common, but employers are definitely behind the times when it comes to supporting their staff.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that and some of your own experiences too. You are definitely so correct in saying that, the policies, they are very gender biased. When I'm reading them myself, you can clearly see they're leaning towards a certain way. So that's definitely something that does need to be changed within organisations as a whole. And Lizzie, I can see you nodding away, and you did mention that you wanted to add something on the topic of flexible working. So please do go ahead.
Yes, and it's off the back of what Nina was talking about in terms of encouraging flexibility within the workplace and enabling employees to work flexibly. And I wanted to reiterate the point around men and women both needing to work flexibly. So the statistics, and I pull these from a dad index that was created by Daddy Life, show that a man is more likely to have his flexible working request turned down. So it's more likely that a man is going to have his flexible working request rejected. So if anybody is here and they are in the shoes of being a people manager, it's to really think through, what that flexible, why that person needs it, because it takes so much courage to put the flexible working request in, particularly if, as you were saying, Michael, you're in that toxic masculine kind of culture in the first place. But also, if we don't see men having their flexible working requests approved, we're continuing to say that men need to work full-time, women therefore are the ones that work part-time, which gets in the way of women, which can get in the way of women getting into those leadership positions. So I wanted to really reiterate that, look at the flexible working request with a lens and think, okay, let's look at this, let's really scrutinize it and see how we can make it possible, particularly if it is a man, because that's a harder barrier at the moment for that group of individuals. And I also just wanted to reiterate the bit that Nina was talking about, flexible working, and that that it is much broader than the working from home. And I know Nina was touching upon this, but getting really, really creative with what that might look like. So is it remote working? Is it compressed hours? Is it job sharing? That's another key enabler to keeping individuals in senior leadership positions, because you're not working part-time, you're job sharing, and therefore you can still have that that impact at a more senior level in a role that, let's say, has to be done 5 days rather than 3. So just really starting to like cast a slightly different lens across flexible working and how that can really enable men to have the flexibility they need as well as women.
Thank you for sharing that, and I love the fact you brought up job sharing. I think that's something that so many people need to, look into more about. And I will also share a link to two people, Hannah and Rachel, who are job share pal on Instagram. Look into them, and you'll learn a lot about that. So thanks for sharing that, Lizzie. And back over to you, Michael. I did want to kind of bouncing back off what you just mentioned a minute ago. So what can, staff and employers do to support LGBTQ plus parents? What family-friendly leave policies can they implement, or what entitlements should they be aware of?
Well, I think policy needs stripping back, and the language of the policy is really important, because that's going to set the tone and make the employee feel comfortable in putting in a request if the policy resonates with them in the first place. All of the policies that I had to adapt to referred to me as a mother, and the workaround was, oh, we'll just cross that out, ignore that. And and I'm not aware that things have moved on in that particular organisation, but I think understanding and engaging with the community that works for that particular firm. So if you have a D&I lead, or if you have a community of LGBTQ people, don't be afraid to engage with them and ask them, what do you think of this policy? Does this speak to you? And I think that's really important to do. And I think we appreciate that as any minority group would do, because it shows that they're engaging with you and that they're listening and they actually care and want to do something about it. The policy might not work, but they're saying, help me. And that should be welcomed and not criticised, but that rarely happens. I think definitely we will see a complete shift in the way firms, it's already massive in the tech industry with fertility workplace benefits, the likes of Carrot Fertility, Fatifa, those types of organisations where they provide a benefit for their employees to have time out to have their fertility treatment or their surrogacy or their adoption process, or whatever that may be, when there's a cost attributed to that. I think that's definitely going to be something that we see happening more and more in the UK. I'm already working with a number of firms that are snapping up those types of benefits now because of the longevity and the retention factor of what that actually does to their workforce. So I think engage, it's that definition of insanity. Like, look at something different. Stop doing the same thing that you've always done. Look to evolve. And if you're not getting it right, it's fine to actually admit that, but engage with professionals and organisations that can make your policy more inclusive and therefore longer standing, and makes you an attractive employer, because it will work in the favour when it comes to some of the issues with attracting staff. Fertility benefits, there were surveys done. Fertility benefits are one of the benefits that new people entering the workplace are actually looking for. And it's definitely all over the tech sector. So I think it's only a matter of time before other sectors adopt that too.
In response to that question, thanks, Michael. Right then, I guess we can go on to our Q&A session now. So we've had some great discussions going on in the chat, so do have time for a couple of questions. So do I best to get through them? I think I want to start off with a question around women leadership. So this is an area that Nina and Lizzie have a lot of knowledge on. So it's what can be the starting point for progression for women who have children and parental responsibilities.
So some practical things. So I think what's really key is to, when you think about a female career progression, you look at your talent pipelines and you look at those individuals that are going on leave, is to make sure that you're capturing what their ambitions are before they go on their leave. So it's not uncommon to go on leave and for your line manager to change, and therefore when that happens, maybe your career ambitions change as well, as in they leave with your line manager. So making sure that there is a system in place to capture the female's ambitions before she goes on leave, and to keep up the regular communication while she is on leave. So if she's saying, look, I'm really interested in a promotion, and a promotion opportunity comes up while she's on leave, is making sure that you're contracting in advance of her maternity leave. But how does she want to be communicated with? Does she want to apply for that role while she's on leave? And if she's successful, will you hold it for her return? Often we kind of pause women's careers whilst they're absent from the workforce, and then they feel as though they're then having to make up for lost time when they return. So doing something in advance of leave, like getting those conversations in place and captured so that anybody can find that information, really, really critical. So, and I think for me, this is about making sure that there are some processes and some practices in place. I think for a lot of women, when we're looking at their career progression after maternity leave, it's very inconsistent, and it comes down to the quality of the line manager. So if we can bring in some consistency around the line manager skill, then I think that's going to improve the experience. Another thing is thinking about how progression can work with part-time work and flexible work. So I think there is a almost like a connection between hours worked and progression. So if you don't work full-time, you can't get promoted. So how can we challenge that assumption that you have to be at your desk all hours of the day in order to progress into a senior position? So keeping women in the line, even if that means for a period of time they're in the line, they're working part-time, how can you keep them in that career progression line, and think really flexibly, or think really creatively about how you can make sure that flexibility works and they can stay on that trajectory.
Some brilliant points there, Lizzie. And Nina, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that's really good point. I actually missed the question, but I thought everything you said, I was just like nodding away, because I'm like, yes, that's really good. Good point.
I'll just repeat the question for you if you want me to. So it's a starting point for progression for women who have children and parental responsibilities. So I think person wants to know a bit more about, how women can get back into that kind of work and make progression into, say, leadership roles.
Yeah, I mean, again, I completely agree with everything you said, Lizzie. It's just really making sure we have good supervisors or line managers who are able to have the discussions going. Like, so you're not just, oh yeah, that person's out of work and you forget about them. You need to make sure that that person is constantly included as well, whether it's like new jobs coming aboard. So yeah, 100% I agree with Lizzie that that's the best thing. But then there is the question of like organization being able to train their line managers to be aware of these issues as well. And I think there's a huge gap there, where organizations are maybe not spending enough money on training, and they're maybe becoming line managers or progressing into line managers without the experience through being with the organization after several years, and then like the typical path for them. But still, the company itself may not have invested in the training for them, and then it does create a lot of issues as well there, like in how they're able to be a very good line manager, if you know what I mean.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I do want to kind of extend this question onto Michael as well. So, what kind of starting point for progression for men who have had children and parental responsibilities? You yourself said that, it's a bit difficult initially when you brought the idea of going on parental leave to the organisation that you're previously working with. So, what advice would you give to other men?
It's really tough because as much as I hate to say it, I think we're just not there yet, and we're way off men even feeling comfortable having those conversations. I was told by my line manager that I'd just committed career suicide when I asked for 6 weeks off work to look after our newborn daughter. I went back to work on my 7th week. So it's, and that's not uncommon, that pressure is not uncommon. And I worked in London, lived in Birmingham, and I commuted every day doing that journey. So it was obviously tough, but men really do feel the pressure to, it's such an old-fashioned term, but it's that breadwinner, that toxic masculinity again, of where men just don't open up. And I would be very surprised if many men would have that conversation with their employer about a job share, about flexible working, about reducing their hours, because it's just not commonplace. But it needs to be, because it's just the role of a parent is not defined by gender, and that absolutely needs to be the message. But unfortunately, in the UK, we're years off employers and members of employees actually understanding and getting that.
That's definitely true. Still got a very, very long way to go, especially in terms of just the culture within organisations, as we spoke about earlier. So unfortunately, that is all the time we do have for the questions and answers, but do remember that we will be responding to any questions that haven't been answered after the session via email. Also, do feel free to get in touch with any of the panellists or the Equal Group. We'll put contact details in the chat. So I'm happy to do that, or Lizzie, Michael, Nina, you can put your contact details in the chat if you'd like as well. Also, it would be great if you could get everyone's thoughts and feedback on the webinar session so far. So my colleague Pam is going to launch a feedback poll. If you could all just spend a moment or two filling that out, that would be great. Thanks to everyone who has started to fill out the poll, but I'll go ahead and carry on with our services. I'm going to go into a bit of detail about what exactly we do at the Equal Group. So we work to eradicate bias in the workplace. So essentially, we provide companies with the support and the tools that they need to implement initiatives, but we also work to educate businesses and communities too. So how exactly do we do this? So our approach involves strategic consulting. So this means we partner with companies to provide support and advice that they need to then implement sustainable EDI strategies, drawing on our team of expert consultants. We also develop cutting edge technology, which can then help companies remove bias from their operational processes. And within this process, we provide end-to-end EDI audits to help organizations identify any areas where they can make sustainable and impactful improvements. And as well as this, we deliver well-researched EDI training on a wide range of equality, diversity, and inclusion topics. So essentially, if you do feel that we have touched upon the surface of some of the issues that perhaps you or your organization are facing, or you feel that you are ready to embark on your own EDI journey, we are here to help you unpack that further and just give you some practical tips specific to the issues that you are facing. So we'd love for you all to get in touch with us. And one of the ways that you can do that is by booking a free consultation with us. So I'm happy to share the link for that in the chat right then. And also, if you have enjoyed this webinar, please do engage with us on social media. It is at the Equal Group on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. You can also join our mailing list over at theequalgroup.com, where you can subscribe to us there. And we basically do fortnightly roundups of all the EDI news that's going on. And finally, then, I think, that is it for today's webinar. This is actually our final webinar of the year. So I want to thank you all so much for taking your time to join us today. Nina, Lizzie, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the panel, and for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us all. Are there any final words that you would like to share?
I want to just say thank you for putting this on, and also for everybody taking the time out in their day to, carve out an hour to look at this topic, because it's people like you that are going to make the change happen and are going to bring that day in the future that we're waiting for, bring it forwards.
Yeah, and totally echo that. Thank you, everybody, for taking part and watching. And equally, if there's anything that we can do to assist and to chat to you about surrogacy or about our community, then feel free to get in touch. Absolutely fine. Thank you, everyone. And have a wonderful Christmas. How mad's that?
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Definitely reach out if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer those as well. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for that. And you're right, Michael, it's crazy. Christmas is already here. Yesterday I was actually just watching a Christmas film. I don't know if that's right. I don't know if that's acceptable, if that's too early. But yes, thank you all so much. And I hope you all have a great day. And hopefully we will see you again early next year for another Equal Group webinar. So once again, thank you all so much. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you all of those who have tuned in, and hope you have a wonderful day.